You're listening to the Paul and Philippe podcast. Prepare yourself for loads of unbiased nuances.
Well, Philippe, it's great to have you here again for this new recording of our podcast. Very happy to have you here.
Yes, Paul. Hi. And very, very happy to be here too with you again.
Great.
Discussing a new topic, quite the buzz of the week in Brazil.
You already mentioned the buzz of the week. We have something that kind of like created ripples not only in the Brazilian news sphere, but also around the world, because it involves a person that is well known, since it's, I think, not the richest person anymore, but Elon Musk is a name that should be known by every household. Well, he is in a certain, let's call it conflict or discussion with a Brazilian that probably not many people know of. His name is Alexandre de Moraes. And there has been certain discussions about how to deal with Musk's owned social media platform X, and how to deal with fake news, to deal with misinformation about this. Before we start with what is actually happening there, since I think everybody knows who Elon Musk is, we don't have to reintroduce him, but the other guy probably has not been heard outside of Brazilian households. So maybe, Philippe, you could give us a short introduction about who this guy is, what his function is in the Brazilian state, and where you would like place him politically as well.
Yes. And Alexandre de Moraes, and that's the way the Brazilians tend to pronounce his name, is a very well-known person in Brazil. Okay, he's one of the minister of what we call the federal supreme tribunal, like the North American Supreme Court. It's a very, very similar institution, which has several missions. And one of these most important missions is about protecting the constitutions of Brazil. And it has other missions, though. Beyond protecting the constitution, it's also the institution that is supposed to judge people who cannot be judged by the traditional ways in Brazilian justice, like mayors, governors, deputies, who have a very special status and a differentiated way of being judged. And normally this is the STF, that's the Supremo Tribunal Federal, and the Federal Supreme Tribunal, STF. Okay, so that's the way.
Those people you mentioned, they have something like political immunity. They're not able to be judged.
Yes, because of their political immunity. And then when they are accused of something, or under an investigation, the investigation normally is being led by the STF. And the STF is also the last stage in the traditional procedure. So whatever kind of judgment that cannot reach any final decisions through the traditional procedures, then it goes to the STF. So it's three basic missions: constitution protection, judgment of people who have some kind of immunity and cannot be judged through the traditional procedures, and to give the final decision in the traditional procedure that could not reach these decisions. So it's thousands and thousands of cases that they have to go through every single year, and they are quite busy. There are 11 ministers that compose the STF. Okay. And those members, those ministers, are not elected, and they are being proposed by the President of the Republic.
Similar like in the United States, I assume?
Yeah, but they have to pass through some kind of an approval procedure at the Senate, at the Brazilian Senate. And they must be approved, let's say, by the Senate in order to be institutionalized and to do their new function.
Are they also called lifelong, for a lifelong sentence?
No, it's not lifelong. Even though they have a retirement age, a mandatory retirement age at 75. And so they normally stay quite a long time through the function. But regularly, then one reaches, or he can renounce before if he wants to, for whatever reason, personal reason, health reason, whatever. He has the right to renounce, but it can't, it cannot be sacked, so to speak, by anyone. Even though there is formally a way for them to be impeached, but it has never been done. Even though in the case of Alexandre de Moraes, the former president Bolsonaro tried to impeach him in 2018. So you see, there is quite a long, troubled story of the relation of Alexandre de Moraes with what we call here the far-right parties, and all those led by Bolsonaro. So they have a very special status. Obviously, he was not successful at putting the impeachment through. He had to drop the impeachment because the Senate would not allow the procedure to be implemented. So somehow Alexandre de Moraes won on that one in 2018. And since when they have been at war, basically.
Why did he catch public, let's say, anger or public attention in the first place? Like those judges, I guess you can call them, are supposed to be neutral, I suppose. Yeah. What was happening?
Neutral, discreet, not appear too much on television, not giving interviews, not participating from the debates.
No public
since
figure
they are the last voice. And so they are supposed to be a bit more in the shadows, so to speak, waiting to be called in order to give their formal decision that must be based on the Brazilian law and the Brazilian constitution in a way. But Moraes has a very different profile. He's very active, strongly minded. And what is quite interesting is that when he was chosen in 2017, he was chosen by the center-right parties who gave him support at the Senate. And then he had the majority of the votes in order to be accepted, approved in his new function. And at the time, the leftists saw him as some kind of an enemy. But the situation has totally inverted since then, especially in 2020, when he began to initiate procedures at his own initiative, which was very, very new. Because normally STF is not here to initiate anything.
Why did he do it then? Like, what was his reason?
Because in 2019, the STF voted, the STF voted for itself the right to initiate any procedure. Judicial procedure when the STF, the institution, or some members of the institution were directly targeted by politicians or whoever in the Brazilian society.
Also, so now, they could, like far right.
Now, since 2018, now Bolsonaro was targeting the STF, was targeting Moraes. So, and at the end of 2019, the STF somehow gave himself this possibility, and Moraes was the first one to initiate then in 2020 a procedure called the fake news procedure. It's running until today, because he opened this first one in order to investigate what they call the digital militias of the far right, who try to spread misinformation, disinformation. Remember that in 2020, we had the local election campaign for mayors and some local representatives that we are going to have again in October this year. And that's also one of the reasons there is such a agitation around the theme. But at the time then, Moraes was seen as the one who was protecting society from disinformation, from fake news.
Was he seen like then all political sides, or only from, like, let's say, the leftist side?
At the time, by the leftists. So that's when the relation, or the way what we call the leftists tend to see Moraes began to change. And they saw in him someone who was really invested in protecting democracy. And suddenly, everything was confirmed in 2022, or in 2023, and in January 2023, after the events of the 8th of January, in which he really invested himself as the big protector of democracy against the acts of the 8th of January, which happened, the invasion of the Congress and the depredation of the Congress. And then he opened since then he has opened, I don't know how many investigations that are still running. He put into prison 10, in 8th of January, it was more than 1,400 people who went into jail. Of those 1,400 people, around 800 are still in prison, waiting for the judgment. Some already have been judged. They received between 7 and 14 years of prison. So a very, very harsh.
Just to get it clear, this was not because of spreading fake news online. This was actually by taking real-world action, right?
Yeah, these ones were because of their participation, supposedly active participation in the depredation of the Congress in January of 2023. But it also opened judgments against politicians, against influencers, entrepreneurs, all a sphere of people that were acting in the name of Bolsonaro or followers. So it opened judgment, and many already have been are in prison, or at least have been cut from social media. That's the least.
Do you feel like he was rightfully doing so? Like, did he have the incentive to like fulfill his course as being part of the judge that he is, in order to open those investigations? Or was this rather something like that he wanted to do to kind of put his profile out into the public? Like,
there is certainly a bit of both. As I said, he's a very strong-minded person, very determined, and very aggressive in his approach of law and the protection of law. He normally skip, let's say, the traditional steps until you reach the judgment. As I said, he's the one that is always opening new procedures, even though it's highly unexpected from the SDF. And not only does he open them, but he leads them, and until he reached the final judgment. And then the other ministers will normally follow, if not by unanimity, but by majority, whatever he decides. And so he has a very, very special place, and it has accumulated a lot of power in his hands.
Oh, okay.
Which he's using.
He's not elected,
and
but voted.
Gained
right.
Is a public figure. That has dividing the public society, or the Brazilian society, for the last 3-4 years, especially because of the way he tends to lead those procedures, because he's very, very quick at deciding. And again, maybe in this very special problematic of the relation with the social media, for example, he's being accused of forcing social media to drop or to shut down certain profiles without court order, for example.
Maybe that's a very good transition. So let's get into what has been happening there and why Elon Musk and X, formerly Twitter, are involved there as well. Just to give everybody an information about this, let me just share my screen. And well, there we go with this one. So there has been, like, as you see, Alexandre de Moraes is also active on X, but like he's not really posting that much, so he's not using it. Well, Elon Musk is doing this a lot, and Elon Musk also pointed out that he has been accused of not combating fake news in an according time. But let's hear what he's saying there actually, and try to disseminate this afterwards.
Demands from this Judge Alexandre That's his name on Twitter, at Alexandre. And there would be to suspend accounts immediately. We were given typically 2 hours to suspend an account or face massive fines. And the final straw is we were being given demands to suspend sitting members of the parliament and major journalists. And moreover, we could not tell them that this was at the behest of Alexandre Moraes. We had to pretend that it was due to our rules of service. And that was the final straw, and we said no.
Well, how does that sound to you?
Yeah, that's the heart of the fight between the two. The way Alexandre de Moraes used to conduct investigations. Traditionally, in order for you to ask for an account to be suspended, as it is said, it has to go through several steps. Open an investigation, document everything, and then through an official court order, get in touch with the social media and somehow justify why Brazilian justice is asking for the account to be shut down or to be suspended. And it seems that Alexandre de Moraes did not follow those traditional steps. He would just decide by himself that certain people were harming Brazilian democracy through their account, through their statements in the account, and then he would directly go to the social media and demand in a very, very short period of time, an hour, 2 hours at the most, for the social media to just suspend the account without giving any kind of clear explanation on the why, any documentary justification or anything. So there is a lot of critique regarding Moraes on the way he makes things happen. Somehow not following what is expected of a judge, going through all the phases. But going through all the phases takes a lot of time. And this is not in the profile of Moraes, who is extremely determined and, let's say, likes to be very, very effective in the decision process, because he said the more we wait and the worse the situation become. And then in order to be effective, I have to be quick. And in order to be quick, I have to drop the normal procedures. Extraordinary times, extraordinary measures. That's what he regularly uses as an explanation. And that's what his supporters, his followers, normally explain. That is not harming democracy, is not disrespecting democracy, is defending democracy. And then since the situation through which the Brazilian society have been passing in the last 2-3 years is so extraordinary that it's in itself somehow justifies those kind of extraordinary measures that has been taken.
Do you feel like the judiciary system is adequately equipped to deal with the technological advances that we're having right now, namely social media, and also the laws concerning spread fake news, mis and disinformation?
Yeah, that's another obviously aspect of it. No, I mean, for some, yes. Brazil has a protection of data kind of law. It's 10 years old.
Right.
Hmm?
GPD or something like this?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And it's very broad principles regarding protection of data. And that's another issue, because when he was, for example, making contact with the social media, it would just not to ask to suspend the account. It would also ask to the social media to give all the details on the owners of the account. Oh. Not only the name, for example, whatever kind of data they have on the person, the contact he has, and the contact he was interacting with through the social media, etc. He wanted everything, which was seen as some kind of a disrespect of this protection of data law. But what is lacking in Brazil is some kind of a regulation on the use of social media. Who is responsible for what? Because until the moment, what is happening? The social media just suspend an account when justice asks for the suspension. There is no, let's say, any kind of initiative by the social media to suspend any account on their own initiative. And that's something that Alexandre Moraes wants to impose on social media here. Not to have to wait for the justice to say it, but as soon as they identify a content that can be understood as a threat to democracy or whatever, not only to democracy, but a threat generally speaking, the account should be suspended, or at least the statement should be shut down.
As you mentioned, a threat to democracy. I mean, I assume it is quite hard to actually decide whether certain voices, certain opinions are, let's say, a threat to democracy, being extremely violent, extremely racist, or having terrorist content, and just something that is not maybe in your own favorable political position. So I assume there's a certain force field of where a certain request of suspending an account falls into. And I think this leads us to the question of, like, under which circumstances would it be appropriate for a government to actually restrict either access to social media for a specific person, and also to censor something in order to kind of defend democracy, which is always interpreted by the government itself, isn't it?
Yes. You're perfectly right. And that's how far can we get? How far can we get to defend democracy? How anti-democratic can we be to defend democracy? And as you very well said, regulation of social media is all about what is allowed to be said on social media. And obviously, we already have clear limits independently from social media. I mean, to threat someone directly, threat the life of someone, or as you say, makes racist statement, pedophilia, or they already are included in the local law as being out of the law, and then obviously certainly will suffer the consequences of such kind of statement and a hatred statement of all kinds. Okay, so these very extreme kind of statement are not the issue in themselves, because it's already previewed in the law. It's already there. There is everything is organized to hand down those who make that kind of speech online. The big issue is political opinion. And political alignments with certain parties or certain ideas, etc. Where is the line according to which we are within the law and from which we are out of the law, so to speak? And that's something that obviously is meant to be discussed yet, because collectively,
who should decide?
And it's not just a Brazilian issue on that one.
Certainly not.
Broader.
The question is also who should decide for that? Should it be like a judge of a country like Moraes? Should it be a tech billionaire like Elon Musk who is actually creating those rules for his platform? Or is it the community in general? And for deciding what is not wrong or right? This is a more realistic this
approach.
We don't want to have. But to decide what's actually true or not true, or at least, like, according to facts or not, there's a certain mechanism. I also want to share my screen again. There's a mechanism in Twitter, which is all called a community node. This is not where I want to get. We had a few, for example. So this is just in public here. I'm just sharing, is saying, have you ever wondered what happened to all the fireflies you used to see as a kid? Trust me, you don't want to know. and it's showing a firefly and Bill Gates. So there's certainly some kind of insinuation that Bill Gates, who is victim of being accused of multiple conspiracy theories already, responsible for the death of maybe fireflies. There's some mechanism in X which is called it's called the comments that readers can add to this, and it's showing, for example, here readers added context they thought people might want to know. The community notes, they are called. Firefly populations are reduced due to insecticides and light pollution. It's not a conspiracy by billionaires, but by human-made factors that can be reduced or avoided. And quoting certain
sources, yes,
which makes sense in this regard. I guess there's not so much to discuss about this.
Yeah, that would be considered as a proactive initiative of the social media in order to just give some kind of a warning that certain contents may just be misinformation, disinformation, and so offering the community, as you say, to give certain response, even indirect response, at least counter-argumentation to these very weird kind of statements, just as you showed.
Honestly, this one is also clearly false. Like, I think this is a very weird conspiracy theory, and maybe to add to how those community notes actually work, because there's certain depth to that that we need to understand. So let's look here. The program is severely hampered by the fact that for a community note to be public, it has to be generally accepted by a consensus of people from all across the political spectrum, which is, I think, a very interesting add-on, where it is said that it has to have ideological consensus. That means people on the left and people on the right have to agree that the note must be appended to the tweet, which also means that it requires a cross-ideological agreement on truth. And in an increasingly partisan environment, achieving that consensus is almost
impossible.
But also, like, we achieve a consensus on things that are clearly, they are quite clear, right? There are certain things that we have consensus on and certain things we do not have consensus on. So at least the way how I understand those community notes, they don't try to fake consensus on something where there is no consensus, even though scientific reasons might point to one specific point of view. But do you feel like this is an appropriate way of battling misinformation on dealing with that?
It's an attempt, and it's very welcome. We need this kind of attempts. The big problem here, as you mentioned, is the necessity to reach a consensus, and the consensus takes time. That's the essence of having a debate, a thorough debate, until we finally reach an agreement. And time is what we do not have on social media. Everything is instantaneous. And the more you create division, the more controversial you are, and the more like you will get, and the more you will gain visibility, etc. So it's a good attempt, but we can understand that they will have to go through so many obstacles in order to finally. Again, we will reach a quick consensus on very extreme issues.
Yes. That
are clearly hatred, hate speech, or things at the time. But for more subtle political declaration or positioning, supposition that can be made by people in the social media, then it will take that's too much time in order to reach a consensus and add this kind of note below the tweet. And then something else will appear, and everybody will forget about the previous one. So we have a timing issue here. That's why they justify here those who are the followers of Moraes justify the way Moraes makes things happen, because time is important. And if we go through the traditional ways, we won't be there on time ever. So we will always be behind. And those who are trying to or to harm society will be successful at it, because by the time that justice finally reached them, well, the harm has already been done, so to speak. So how do we prevent this harm to be done? And that's where, again, Moraes has the clear understanding that beyond the fact that he has to go against the law in order to make the law to be obeyed, that now the social media must be proactive. And that's something like a precognition kind of program. And that the social media must be able to identify whatever kind of statement is being put on the net at the moment it is being put on the net.
Is that a fair demand? Do you think we possess the technological advances to do this adequately already without
I don't think so.
manually?
I'm not even sure we should do that. But anyway, the thing is, and that there is, at least as far as I can understand, and there is a pressure on Moraes' part to try to impose that new kind of posture by social media. But for the social media, it's a huge investment in technology, but also in people that would have to be there constantly on the screen and going through all what is being published and somehow identify whatever statement that could appear as being moderately, or I don't know, motive of contentious, and then point it out or put it out. I don't know how they would make it happen, but is it reasonable? Even to go to the root of it. Yes, in order for the people not to harm society, then do not give them access to the net, so to speak. Shut them down even before they are in the rooms. Close the door. Close the door before they enter, and let them outside.
To me, it sounds
that's exclusion. I mean, we are working out of an exclusion principle, not of an inclusion principle.
right. To me, that sounds like there will be coexisting spheres of opinions that are not necessarily intertangled, where you have like your bubbles of your opinions where you exist in, and then it's like an echo chamber that's constantly repeated at. It's kind of getting increasingly hard to have a, let's say, fair and based discussion with people from another political opinion that you have. And I feel like this is fostered by social media, and it's fostered by algorithms increasingly push like more extremist contents towards you.
Yes, that's the dark side of social media. And we are here talking about a very basic dilemma of every human being on earth. What is more important for you, liberty or security? Because you can't have both.
Which political spectrum favors which?
Well, that's the big issue, because, for example, I was listening to a leftist deputy that, for example, sometimes individual liberty must be restricted in order to guarantee the respect of collective liberty. I don't even know what she really is talking about when she talks about collective liberty. But the thing is that she was justifying the fact that we can restrict liberty, individual liberty, in the name of something greater that she called collective liberty, which in my way, it would be more collective security than security, in the sense that collective protection against basic rules that we have determined together in the system that we are part of, which in Brazil, for example, would be the democratic system. And in order to protect democracy, we need a certain level of security. And that this level of security somehow will limit your individual liberties. So how far do we accept to go in terms of civil or liberties or individual liberties restrictions in the name of this collective security of the institution from which we all depend.
That's a great question.
And that's more than just a political question, that's more than just a judicial question, and that's a societal question, that may be a philosophical question, obviously. It has many, many dimensions. But that's the polarity that we all face, because we can't have both fully secure. I mean, if you want security, you will normally have to abandon certain of your liberties. You will accept to obey certain laws. You will accept to self-censor yourself in order to be more protected. And if you want liberty, as Musk is constantly repeating, that he is the absolutist defender of liberty. So in his point of view, no restriction is valid on liberty.
So we would have to find a way how to include people with different risk aversities from all different spectrums that we have.
Yes,
and so to
understanding
on a common platform without either restricting people's liberties that they seem to have in order of just opinion whatever you want, but also not insulting people that want to have a certain restriction imposed and not be exposed to a couple of opinions that are, for them at least, clearly insulting. I guess it's a very delicate balance that we need to strike there. It's not,
and it's a balance that we haven't found in many.
We're gonna answer this podcast episode, but
but that's just to open our minds and try to have the opportunity to think about what really matters at the end of the day for you as an individual. What is the kind of security you really need? And if you say you like liberty, that you defend liberty, how responsible are you to assume the consequences of your acts formally? Because the more protected you are, the less responsible you are. Because the judiciary system will take somehow, you just have to follow the law and bend to the law. And you don't need to be responsible for anything, because third people just decide for you everything in a very, very highly protected environment. But in a less protected environment, then you have the responsibility to be aware of the consequences of your freedom. Freedom is not free, so to speak. It has its price. And the price of freedom is responsibility. So it's a question of education.
Perfect. I think this sounds like a very good closing words. There's probably no better way to put this. Philippe, thank you so much for this very exciting discussion. I think we gained a lot of insights to not only Brazilian political and jurisdictional system, but also had like a very nice, rather philosophical discussions about personal liberty, but also personal responsibilities. And I'm sure that there's many things that the listeners can take from this discussion. So again, thanks a lot.
Thank you for the opportunity. And remember, it's just beginning.